Okay, so welcome to today's Green Solar Academy alumni event, or actually we could even call it a podcast, because we are using all the events and we put them on our website. So whatever you missed this year or last year, you can find it online as a podcast, and you can listen to the old discussions. And it's, I think, quite interesting. Let's see what comes up today. Today, the topic is Intersolar Europe, or also the Smarter E, how it is called a few years already, I think 10 now, meanwhile, because this is the time. So since 10 years ago, we have been working more in not only solar, but also in the battery sector, in the e-mobility sector. And just to cover all the topics, the Intersolar changed the name to Smarter E. And so, yeah, I wanted to welcome today our technology partners and two guys who actually also exhibited at the Intersolar in Munich this year, which is Adriaan Rootman from Schletter and Jason from Solis. Thank you. Who is still called Antje because he had some technical issues, and now he joined with my link, but I think he will change it. But it's good that we could get that done. I have to apologize, Canadian Solar. They also were supposed to be with us, but unfortunately they could not join today. Yeah, so I'm quite happy to exchange a little bit to discuss what happened. So at the Intersolar, so what we saw, it was again bigger than last year. And I would guess that some of you also joined our solar show wrap up, or maybe even went to the solar show. And so you can imagine, so if you never had a chance to go to the Intersolar, so it is like the this year solar show, but just 5 times bigger. So actually, I don't know, I never made it to see all the halls. So Sakani and I, we were also there. Yeah, so that's the topic today. And also, what was the mood? What are the newest developments? And that's what we want to discuss. And I would guess, Sakani, do you want to give us a short introduction on how the whole event is working for those who did not join one of the alumni events so far?
Okay, yes, I can do that. Thank you all for joining. And so basically we have a Q&A function that you can use to post your questions, or the chat function. You can use either of those, and all your questions will be answered at the end of the presentations and the discussions. And we will have 2 polls that will launch now in the beginning of the presentation and one at the end. And also please note that the recording will be shared with you and everybody who registered tomorrow morning. So we'll share the recording and the contacts of our speakers, and also the recording will be uploaded onto our website as a podcast, so you can also access it from there. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tsukani. And this would not be a real podcast. So if we would not have a commercial clock. And so let me quickly share a short presentation with you. And now, as usual, so this is why we don't do online training. As usual, I struggle to share the presentation, the right one. So let me see if this is the right, no, that's not the right button. Okay, let me try to, okay, sorry guys. This thing, let me share it this way. Screen number 3, sharing. And now let me get in the presentation mode. And I would guess now you do not see the right slide, right? Doesn't matter. So let me just tell you something about our commercial course, because what we saw at the Intersolar and what we will discuss in the next minutes is that there's definitely a move all over the world, or especially in South Africa and in Europe, towards the CNI sector. And we from Green, so we also offer a special course on that, which is the commercial PV design training. And this is especially developed for our alumni. It's an advanced professional course, and we target people working in PV installers who want to scale their business and go in the CNI market. So technicians, engineers, business owners. And so it is a 3-day, very intense course where we discuss everything from first customer visit to the commissioning to the project management. We touch design and everything. And we thought it makes sense to give you a little insight in the course, that you see who will be the trainer, what can you expect? And so therefore we come up with a series of webinars to teaser the content. And so we already had one, which is available on the website or on the YouTube channel, sorry. And we will have another one on the 5th of September. And if you are interested, Sakani can share information with you, or you find it on the website. So, and that was the commercial plug. So a little bit more than 1 minute, and you could not skip it. And let's now dive deep in the topic. So let's start with Jason. So what moved the solar industry at this year Intersolar?
Hi, Antje. Thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, so what we've noticed this year in the market, and obviously the markets in South Africa as well, and Europe, what we saw an increase in is the CNI storage, and obviously grid tie utility scale systems as well. Also on the commercial side as well, on the LV side of grid tie systems, that's also increased now quite significantly. But our main focus basically for us at Intersolar, for the South African representatives, was the CNI storage side, which we found very interesting. We've actually got a few sites running now currently with our products out in the market, and it's starting to pick up. It's starting to pick up quite significantly. Yeah. So yeah, we're excited. We're very excited with CNI storage.
We went to your booth, and actually Sakani and I, so and we saw all the different devices. So I mean, what do you have especially for the CNI market, and why?
Look, the grid tie systems in Europe is obviously quite a big boom. So we focused a lot on the utility scale side and size inverters. That was also a big attraction from the Europe side. Again, a lot of the more Africa countries that visited Intersolar was more focused on the storage side of the market. So we also exhibited that quite a lot. So we had a sort of a bit of a mixture. But also we had a few small things as well, like the little rooftop, little micro inverters. That was something we also have out there, but it wasn't one of our main focuses this year.
And I mean, we know that the market is different in Europe and South Africa. However, I mean, in Europe, the market is like a more financial market. It's driven by people who want to invest, people who want to save money, don't spend a fortune for the electricity. And what we saw is that there was a lot of hybrid inverters. And so how is it? I mean, the hybrid inverters, they were kind of, I mean, we saw a lot of developments in the last 2 years, and especially because of South Africa. So where do you see that? And also, how was this so received from the Europeans? So
Yes, yeah, very interesting. I mean, for us in South Africa and Africa, mostly we focused on the hybrid inverters for two specific reasons. Was obviously to give the at the end user the ability to go through what we call load shedding or load reduction, and then also have the ability to have an ROI on his investment, doing some energy savings as well, where the guys would then discharge the batteries at nighttime to sort of assist with nighttime usage, draw that from the battery in the next day, also charge the batteries back up, but also have the reserve for when there is load reduction or load shedding. Now, what we've noticed in the European markets is that guys are moving more towards that space now, where yes, you did have the grid tie systems giving you the solar energy in the daytime, but they now see a significant change in the hybrid inverters where they can see, okay, I can make a savings at night as well. So I can basically start self-consuming. That's basically what we're aiming for now, is the self-consumption solution at the end of the day.
So I think that's also something what we can where we can learn from for South Africa, because as all of us know, our electricity prices also increase ongoing.
Yes, 100%. Because our focus now in South Africa, our load reduction has reduced a little bit. So we've seen an increase in grid tie systems being in the layman's term, grid tie systems being built again, and also a lot of CNI storage as well. But these storage systems are actually basically for self-consumption from the end user side. So the focus now for most of the sales representatives are now to sell the system as what it was intended for. It is for a return on investment on your nighttime usage, daytime usage, and then also having the ability to have electricity during load shedding times. Yeah. So yeah.
Interesting. So Adriaan, so how did you see it? So what did the mood, what moved the industry? So what was the mood? So you always say it's just mounting, but I mean, there was more than one hall with all that exhibitors with mounting systems, and especially also on your booth, we saw a lot of different systems, also new systems.
Yeah, so from my side, hello everybody. Just a quick introduction, if I may, on Schletter, for those who don't know us. So Schletter is headquartered in Germany, so just a few kilometers away from where Intersolar happens every year. They were founded back in 1968 already in Bavaria. And in South Africa, Schletter has already been here since the early 2012 days, building from the first round of IPP projects and building in, growing with the market as we went along. I think Schletter is meanwhile globally represented in most markets across the globe, and with an installed capacity of reaching almost 60 gigawatt meanwhile. So I think the overall feeling about what was happening at Intersolar was quite positive. I think again, Schletter had a 240 square meter booth there, and we had representatives from all across the globe and all the markets where we are active, and we see a lot of stakeholder engagement, and we saw obviously a lot of customers, obviously a lot of German or European based customers, but also a lot of international customers, so a lot of customers from South Africa. We could have good discussions in our own language, which is also always interesting. But I think overall, even though I expected that maybe the mood would have been a little bit dampened as the market globally kind of settled a little bit compared to maybe last year, I think the overall sentiment is still extremely positive. So the attendance was great. There's hundreds of thousands of people attending the event, and thousands of people on your booth. And from what I can see, renewable energy, overall, but specifically solar and various components out there is really in a positive space, growing up and up, because there is absolutely no cheaper way of producing electricity than solar anywhere in the world. And I think that was not the case 10 or 20 years ago, but meanwhile it is the case. Yeah. So there's a lot of challenges that comes with solar not being able to do baseload production. And there's a lot of innovation around, the typical problems of, only the sunshine hours during the day. But with that said, it's still, with battery storage becoming more affordable, the technology developing quite rapidly there as well, together with hybrid inverters. There's a big, growth in that, in that industry overall. And I think, we heard just a little bit earlier that, with the new technology and the hybrid inverters and the different concepts, whether it's feed-in tariffs or net metering, or, self-consumption, or if we are doing, storage for nighttime consumption or load shedding, backup UPS configurations. I think all of those innovations that we see across the industry, across the different components of a system, allow solar to be more practical or more feasible to use. Right? Apart from just cost driver, there's also, an inverter can now to, off-grid and on-grid in the same equipment. That was not possible 10 years ago. It was a lot more complicated 10 years ago. So I think, there's a reason why we see all this innovation, because the market is growing and there's a lot of interest. And in terms of energy production, globally, whether it's small scale residential or whether C&I, whether utility, it makes sense, for each, part of the implementation scope. So I think that is, to be expected, to see that there is a very positive, sentiment towards solar overall, well represented, I think, across industry stakeholders and also globally. So in a nutshell, that's overall quite positive, as expected.
Oh, good. But from the, I mean, you just said of course, so the sun is only shining during the day, but so you had also some new technology at your booth, so like a new tracker system. So maybe you can tell us something about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's always an important showcase to present and showcase your new products, or your most popular or most innovative products. And Schletter obviously had the opportunity to do that as well. And I think what's for us the one of the most important projects or products is, meanwhile, our tracking systems. I think it's quite unique in the market and quite innovative with the tracking mechanism, but also the locking mechanism in every post. So there's a lot of technology that went and development that went into getting to that point, and that's every year. It's not necessarily a new product for this year, but every year one of our main attractions as tracking systems, especially if you go to utility space, is the preferred method of mounting solar modules, because your increase in yield is worth that much more. And we see, sometimes a little bit stagnation in the industry, but we also saw that Schletter went and they didn't kind of try to solve the problems by adding stuff onto it. They went back and, in a sense, reinvented the wheel and created a completely new tracking mechanism, which is what we claim as stable as fixed tilt. Patented design that allows a tracking system to be locked into place in all weather conditions. And this allows us to use tracking systems in hurricane zones or high wind zones where otherwise traditionally it would not have been possible. So that's one of our key products that for us is quite important and grabs a lot of attention from the industry. And on the rooftop side, I think what was quite interesting is that the South African products, there's a lot of products developed for South Africa that's also shown in at Intersolar. And it's quite interesting to see how the European markets react to these products, because we have different types of roof sheeting or different shapes or different preferences from the installers, which we then would go and put into our design cycle and then come up with a product that solves that specific problem for South Africa. But interestingly enough, that's not something that was necessarily driven by one of the key markets in Europe, but it's still an interesting product. So, for example, our bracket to mount modules onto corrugated roofs. Corrugated is quite common in South Africa, but there's a lot of risk in the thickness of the sheet or the wind loading on the modules. So that a lot of effort goes into making sure that we can actually mount modules onto those roofs, to make sure also that this mounting structure lasts as long, even outlasts the solar system in general. So that for me was also quite interesting to see how the South African products also features in a more global stage, if that makes sense.
And are then all the products certified internationally? Or only in the specific areas, regions? So, I mean, if we would yet now use a mounting structure from South Africa or developed for South Africa from Schletter, so could we easily move that to Europe or to Brazil or?
Yeah, so obviously the overall kind of certification structure within the group is quite important. There's more than just product certification, but there's also certifying, your supply chain concepts in terms of, compliance. But there's also, interestingly enough, every country's got their own, local codes under which you need to design, which is maybe not a specific product specific, but it's overall system specific. So, for example, we can use the product in different countries, but also then apply the different wind zone calculations, static calculations for that country. So in South Africa, it would be the SANS standards, and with that we can issue a design report, which you then require again for your insurance, as an example, or for your PR sign off on your projects. So it's not just, a list of materials and then go install it. It's actually an engineering calculation that goes into the selection of the products. But that engineering calculation already starts with the design of the products that goes into your standard certification for the development of the product as such, but also how it is implemented at the end.
Interesting. Maybe one more question on the thing is that especially from which I always doubt a little bit if tracking systems are the right mounting systems for every bigger solar system. So from your point of view, I mean, because it always comes with extra cost and extra maintenance, and we all know that maintenance is not really the strength in South Africa. So what would you suggest? So from which system size and in which area, or from which irradiation? So where is it feasible from your experience?
So tracking systems per se, I must say, it's really interesting in utility scale projects for the most part, and you will see also those companies that focuses only on tracking systems usually only focuses on much larger projects. For tracking systems, in terms of the feasibility or the viability, it's usually a position, where you are at and how far you are from the equator. So the closer you get to the equator on single axis tracking, you find that you will get your yield will increase, and the further you get away, the lower your yield increase would have been compared to if you would just do a fixed tilt structure. And I think in South Africa, every single financial model that I've seen, regardless where it's at, it is feasible financially to go to a tracking system. The question though is, does the effort, is the juice worth the squeeze? And I think that becomes, let's say, for example, a typical example, a farmer, wants to install a tracking system on his farm, or maybe a factory wants to do it. And we get this a lot, and in many cases it is feasible. But the question I always ask is, what is the main, what's the main business of the end customer there? Is it to farm, or is it to maintain a tracking system? Not that tracking systems require significant maintenance, but there are moving parts and everything. You send your car in, once a year for a service. Anything that moves is something that you need to, in a sense, look into. So the Schletter tracking system is actually been designed and developed to be, for the most part, maintenance free. It's an open, unlubricated system, and there's a lot of benefits with that. But you have, for example, a TCU, or tracker control unit, for every tracking system, and these are electronics. And now you have to protect it against lightning strikes. And as your electronics would fail in the rest of your system, you will also find the same thing. So it feels to me that, if we look past the benefits of what the tracker offers, there's also benefits what you can get from fixed tilt structures, right? So a fixed tilt structure you install now, and you go back in 20 years to replace the modules and put new ones on. And I think maybe not exactly in that case, but the point is, if you want to install something and forget about it, then that's probably the better option to go. But if you reach a minimum system size that makes sense, that's usually about 5 megawatts and up. It does make sense to say, you know what, let's consider that. But we also then talk about what does my maintenance schedule look like if need be. And also, do we have spare parts on key equipment? So that's generally where it goes by. And if you're a utility company and you've got a couple of 100 megawatts that you're running O&M on, in any case, you have a pool of replacement parts. You have a team that can go and monitor error messages that comes from the tracking control unit. So then it's a slightly, then your main business is actually managing solar plants. So you don't want to really forget about it. So it depends a little bit on, what do we want to achieve? Because if you only want to achieve additional yield, then, we can do this by including more modules, for example. Or if we want to be more efficient in how we use the available land area, then we can go east-west, for example. So yes, you sacrifice some specific yield from kilowatt hours versus kilowatt peak, but you do get the benefit of the increased system size again. So there are a lot of different, decisions that you make throughout that whole design process for your plant. And I don't think there is a one rule to rule them all in a sense. Yeah. You need to look at the variations and the preferences and the benefits that you get for that specific site. Sorry, that's a bit of the long answer, but in a nutshell, that should cover most of it.
Yeah, but I think that's always the case. So that there is not the solution, and I think this is not only in solar. That actually applies to the whole life. So yeah, but interesting. So interesting view. Yeah, Jason. So what is the new technology trend in the inverter market, but also especially for you? So from Intersolar, what did you take home, or what did you bring?
Okay, so obviously with the new technology that we've got out now, we're very excited with our 50 kilowatt hybrid. It's a new launch. We've been doing quite a lot of testing in R&D centers. We're very proud to say that all our inverters, basically from even the low voltage right up to high voltage systems, have got a new development in them. So basically what we've done is we've increased and upgraded our inverters in such a way that we have ease of generator connectivity, we have ease of AC coupling with the systems, software updates, that type of thing. It actually is so user-friendly now compared to it 2-3 years ago. And obviously being on our own cloud now, so we've gone on to our own cloud monitoring system, Solis Cloud, over a few years already. And there's always one or two little updates that needs to be done, but we've been working on that quite significantly. And I must be honest with you, the cloud is amazing. I mean, I've been in the industry over 10 years now, and I've worked on quite a lot of monitoring systems out there. And I'm not just saying it because I work for Solis, but I'm saying it because I've dealt with quite a few monitoring systems out there. And I find it very, very user-friendly. The installers can quickly gain access into the systems, and into the machines if an end user phones with a problem. And obviously, our technical support is also there, available for the installers and the end users to give us a call if anything had to go wrong or some questions need to be asked. We've got a full dedicated technical team because that supports our clients. But yeah, in a short shell, basically our 50 kilowatt hybrid was our most exciting product at our launch. We've also recently launched PCS systems that's now currently running from 100 kilowatt up to 600 kilowatts. But that's also again storage size. That is still sort of in a release stage. So we're doing a lot of testing in our own labs with that. But what's available to the market now is what you saw on the stand. And that is what we are very proud to say. I mean, we actually brought back in most of our products the LCD screen. I don't know if anybody is listening in the podcast. No, I've done Solis hybrid inverter systems before, where we removed some of the screens on the machines. And it sort of, we were sort of in limbo with this to say that, the end user now doesn't have ability to log into the system just via a screen. They needed to log into the system via our app, which is also very unique. It's a Bluetooth app that you connect to the phone. But then we sort of went through another product solutions meetings back and forth, and we decided to bring the screens back. So 90% of the inverters that you see that you did see on our standard Intersolar now has the new quite nice wide angled screen. These screens are very interactive, but also security limited to some end users and obviously to the installers, etc. But you still have the ability to log in through the Bluetooth app. That is what I sort of like about the systems, is that you've got two ways of commissioning the systems. The ease of installation is excellent. I mean, for me, being in the industry, I was in the industry for 10 years in an EPC state, and if I look back in the day, I think if Solis came out with the hybrids a lot sooner, I think a lot of my portfolios would have changed in those days, because of the ease of installation, because of time spent on site. A lot less time is spent on site due to the easy logging to the machines, commissioning the machines. We also technically support our installers as well. We supply them with standard operating procedures that help them. I actually write the standard operating procedures myself. So I go through those issues. We look at all of the machines issues, and we sort of bring them all together, and we say, okay, guys, this is what we have, this is what we can offer, and this is how we can do it. Yeah.
I think that the LCD screens are especially nice for the customers. I mean, for the users. Good. Because I mean, for the blue, I would guess. I mean, I know that. So when Europeans invest in PV, they are so proud. They start to record every day how much electricity they produced, and they want to see it, and they want to see the performance, and you can easily see it on an LCD. And then I think that's also like a nice selling point. So for the installers, I mean, for you to the installers, but also especially for the installers to the end clients.
End client, yeah.
You said you have that the cloud, and so Solis is actually an inverter manufacturer, but I understood that you also want to go that way to be a one-stop shop, that so one also could get the whole package from you. So with batteries, and so is this right?
No, look, we as a PV inverter manufacturer or an inverter manufacturer decided, we have spoken about this before in a few meetings and over a few years already, and we will not manufacture batteries. Our inverters are compatible with a wide range of batteries out there in the market. Especially us in South Africa, we focused quite a lot on these South African brands that are known to us here in South Africa, brands that's being sold by our distributors. We obviously sell to distributors. Distributors sell to wholesalers and end users or installers. But from a storage point of view, we're not really going to go that route. I think it's rather stick with what you're good at, because Solis actually started as a PV inverter manufacturer, a grid tie inverter manufacturer, and then as time went on, we then developed into hybrid systems, and then we've been taking it from there. I think we're not going to go. We do a lot of battery testing. We do it in South Africa as well, and we do it overseas as well, and then we incorporate that into our inverters firmware. So we have a wide variety, like I've mentioned, we've got a wide variety of batteries on our battery compatibility lists. If anybody requires the battery compatibility list of a specific product, for example, a high voltage or low voltage, then more than welcome to contact us or go onto our website, have a look at that, and you'll be able to get that document from that inverter specification.
But so thanks, but so how important is, I mean, taking into account what we discussed so far, and also not having load shedding, luckily, so but still having the opportunity to offer, so to have solar as the cheapest electricity source. So, but that means so we cannot use solar energy when the sun is shining. So how important is an energy management system, and what do you suggest to do from the Solis point of view, or as an inverter manufacturer?
Look, we've had the discussion where a lot of end users are now, or a lot of installers are now sort of selling the grid tie system space again in South Africa due to the fact that we don't have as much load shedding as we used to have. Yes, it is one way to go about it. Definitely it is. But what we've noticed as well now is a lot of our hybrid machines are now being AC coupled or integrated into in existing PV plants. So if there's an existing PV plant, they AC couple it into the structure, and have the storage availability now as well. Because what the customer has started noticing is that, as I mentioned, you now have nighttime savings that you can do from your batteries as well. So in a sense, the clients are trying to get off the grid, if you want to call it in brackets. They want to pay the councils as little as what they can, in layman's terms, if you want to call it that, and be self-sustained, basically. So, yeah, our market is shifting definitely in that direction. So, from an ESS point of view, the energy storage sector definitely is starting to rise again. It's just the approach onto that is obviously how the sales representatives would obviously sell that to the end user or customer.
Yeah, and we have to take into account, I mean, the European market was very long a pure grid-tied market. And when the war in the Ukraine started, everybody wanted to have batteries and attach it to the solar systems, but it's just not possible if you have a pure grid-tied inverter. And then also if you see Ghana, for instance, they had their first rounds of load shedding when it started also in South Africa, and now it was quiet for minimum 5 years, and now it comes again. So there's quite a bit of advantage in hybrid inverters. Yeah, Adriaan, so you said so that you from Schletter, you have also a very cool design tool, or like it's not really a complete design tool, but maybe you just tell us what we are able to do with that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the trends. Getting back to one of your previous questions, I think one of the trends that we see, in something as simple as mounting structures, also quite a lot of digitalization in different aspects. But most commonly, you would find the design software is quite important. Yeah, so we find quite a lot of different design software is already out there that's enabling, installers or EPCs to be, to design full, scope of the system, and in some cases also mounting structure. But I think when it comes to mounting structure, we moving a little bit away from electrical design or string layout, and when we get a little bit closer to a structural design, which is it's a bit of a different discipline, and usually that's quite difficult. Is where a lot of your your R&D sits and a lot of your IP sits. And I think with Schletter we've got a couple of different versions of software that we are looking at and also looking at introducing into the market. But I think the benefits of Schletter's design software would be for you to in your country, in this case even within South Africa, have a software that's able to design, not only a list of materials, a bill of materials based on your layout, but also have some, calculations behind it that can give you a design report based on the South African standards. So that is quite a, an important part of, Schletter's offering and the value proposition that we give is to say, it's not that easy for you to always consider every aspect of integrating PV into a building or onto a roof, or even into ground mount structures. So what we do is in the back end give you that relatively easy interface to say which modules are you using, which area, what is the parameters of your building code that you want to incorporate, and how do we fit this onto your roof, and then we would be able to tell you, or the software would tell you, avoid the edge and corner zones because the wind loading increases there, or add additional clamp there because your module pressure is too high. And I think this is another trend that, together with, with the tool that we offer, the software that we offer, the trend is that modules are getting bigger. Frames are getting, thinner, and, we cannot just assume that we can fix the same number of, fixing points on a module on the roof than what we had 5 years ago when the modules were 1 meter by 1.7. Now the modules are around 2.5 meters and going as wide as 1.3. So the number of fixing points to your module reduces. So the number of fixing points per module surface area reduces. So there's more strain or more load on those remaining fixing points. And it's important to know, what's the limitations there, and do I introduce risk into into my structure by just assuming that the same number of clamps I used before will now work fine. And that's the benefit of having a tool like what Schletter offers, to make sure that when you are presenting something to your customer, or if you're installing something on a roof, that you can go walk away peace of mind. And if something goes wrong, if there's a wind event or a big storm, we've seen few in Cape Town recently, and something does go wrong, then at least what you've done is best practice. Then it's an insurance topic. But if something goes wrong and the insurance, and we deal with these cases quite often, the insurance comes afterwards and asks you, where's your design report, or based on what did you sign this off, then it's a bit of a tricky position to be in. I think these are the benefits of that component, that is not only just mounting structure, but also a very strong technical software behind it to make sure that you can implement mounting structures also safely and have value for your customer over the next 20 years. I think that is in a nutshell. So what we also see is quite a lot of innovative tools coming up now. For example, at Intersolar, we showcased our Agri PV software, which is only starting up now. But the idea there would be, for example, to model or simulate not only your PV yield, but also your agricultural yield. So what would your crop yield be if you allocate certain space to one of Schletter's Agri PV components, like the Sol Farm solution, where you have modules installed completely vertically, or the tracking system that is raised higher above the crops and can track up to 72 degrees east-west direction. So now you can take a mounting structure which is developed specific for integrating into agri environments, and you can simulate that and get your electricity yield, but also then simulate what your agricultural yield would be, and get kind of a financial model that you can start to make decisions based on. Does it make sense to track or not to track, or does it make sense to rather plant crops or not? So I think that's maybe in South Africa not as much of an important topic as it's in Europe at the moment. But again, we see innovation within that digitalization space, where we can start to say, let's make wise decisions or informed decisions or well calculated decisions in why we are doing what we are doing. So that I guess is where a lot of innovation also happens, and very specific. I think the tool that Schletter does offer there is quite unique in that space.
Yeah, and it's good that we have tools like that. I mean, I'm a civil engineer, and so from my point of view, solar is not only electricity, and the bigger the systems are, the more civil engineering is involved. And in South Africa, it is still quite electricians only field if you check the standards and everything. So but I hope that comes more and more. We tried to get also the civil engineers on board. We recently had a webinar with their association, so very interesting. Yeah, so where do you think, what can we expect the coming year? And we already, maybe we just say the next months, because the answers today are already so different to the answers of the questions after the solar show. But maybe Jason, you want to start.
Yeah, sure. We like I've mentioned before, and we're very excited about our hybrid converter, the 50 kilowatt high voltage. We've got a few ranges coming out in that as well. I think we sort of stepping up when it comes to generator integration, as I've mentioned before. We've been getting quite a lot of positive feedback from our clients as well. Our system's in such a way is that if the client wants to do the systems in stages, what's quite exciting about our high voltage units is that you can start it as a grid tie system, then build it up with a battery system if you wanted to, then do a generator integration system, and then AC couple if you needed more power to it. And again, the ease of installation is so much easier than most other products out there that I know personally. It's the CNI scale utility as well. We're looking forward to the utility releases of our high voltage machines as well, from the 255 kilowatt up to 350 kilowatt machines. This is also going to be exciting for us. I think next year, or maybe 18 or maybe even 2 years from now, we will commission a site in a utility scale site in Africa. So we're really looking forward to that. Yeah.
So hopelessly in South Africa. Adriaan, so you said in our pre-discussion that PV industry is still booming. So maybe you can answer why. And so we still have some questions in the chat. So you have 2 minutes.
I have 2 minutes. Okay, thanks for defining the limitations. I think PV has been booming for quite a bit in the last few years, and it was a bit of a perfect storm with, as you mentioned before, the war in Ukraine, which sent Europe a bit in a panic in terms of electricity prices just order of magnitude increased overnight in those markets, and we see in South Africa parallel to that, for example, running a lot of load shedding and having to deal with that. And I think we saw a very quick, rapid increase in what the market wanted or expected or what needed to happen. But I think now things are starting to settle down a little bit, and we're going back to a more traditional market, which doesn't mean that Schletter is not Schletter, the solar is not interesting anymore. It just means that we are not, reacting, we are acting. So we are making decisions that is kind of wise, and we're making decisions that's informed, and we focus on value rather than just solving a short-term problem. And I think this is where I see the market going again. I think there will be it's an interesting time for South African market as well, but globally we see some variation in what everybody might have forecasted. But for us in South Africa, I'm still quite positive. There's a migration back, towards not trying to just, solve or trying to solve the load shedding problem, but also trying to make sure that we are efficient in how we implement PV, making sure it lasts long enough, and that we are, offsetting energy that's coming from, coal or diesel or wherever. And I think this is why solar started initially, because it wasn't always cheap, but it was the right thing to do. But still the right thing to do. Now it's meanwhile cheap as well. And there's no reason for anybody to not go with a grid-tied system, whether it's residential, commercial, utility, because it's much cheaper than what you can buy from your local municipality at the moment. And I think we will see that continue. And maybe, where we in the last year or two saw that the focus was rather bigger batteries than less PV, it will go back to let's do more PV, because solar modules are the only thing that's making electricity. So that's the only thing that's making you money or saving you money. Batteries just enables that for you. And I think it will be balancing out a little bit again. We see, I don't know if my 2 minutes is up yet, but we definitely also will see, I think, a shift from residential over to a more CNI focused environment, as the residential space is quite saturated in terms of a lot of people spend a lot of money in a short space of time, which is kind of unnatural. So it'll take a little bit of time for that to settle in again. That's my personal view. And there will be still a lot happening in the CNI space, because the business model, every year the power goes up, electricity cost goes up, and energy storage or PV modules comes down. That financial model becomes more and more and more attractive. Having 15 years ago, when we had an IRR over 20 or 30 years, that's barely making sense. We already got excited. Now we have payback periods of much shorter than that. So I think that it still makes sense to go PV. It's just now we need to refocus on what we are selling. We are not selling the solution for load shedding. We are selling the solution for cheaper, cleaner alternative energy.
Yeah, thank you. It was slightly longer, but I expected that.
Sorry.
So I screened the questions a little bit. I have a simple one to start, and then I think, Tsakani, you have to help me. A simple one is, can Solis inverters be interfaced with Victron inverters?
Yes, you can. So our PV grid-tied inverters can be AC coupled with Victron inverters, definitely. From a frequency point of view, it's way cheaper than some of the other inverters out there that you can AC couple with. That's actually how I met Solis. 6 years ago, I did a Victron system on a farm, and I needed to look for an alternative energy, and I then decided to AC couple, and I got hold of Solis, and it works beautiful. We do quite a lot. I speak a lot to the Victron guys as well here in South Africa with Get Off Grid. We communicate quite a lot when we're doing AC coupling with the Solis inverters. So yes, okay.
Okay, interesting. Another question, so is it true that the PV installation have slowed down in South Africa and internationally this year? Which is a tricky one. So who wants to take it?
So from my perspective, I think that there is definitely a slowdown in the growth. So whether it's less or more, it's not clear at the moment. It's also difficult to always know exactly. But there's definitely a slowdown in the growth, and there's also not necessarily globally. I can't speak for every market, but in South Africa and also in Germany, we've seen this. But it's also not necessarily a slowdown in growth for solar in general. It is for very specific segments, and for us, it's rooftop. Sorry, not rooftop, residential rooftop. So there we have definitely seen, and from the market get feedback that there's a drop in the residential and uptake on PV installations, or for that matter, battery installations as well. But that's quite typical with the load shedding cycles. After load shedding stops, every time there's a kind of a dead period. Yeah. That's my view.
Yeah, you're 100% right. We also see that in Europe. So from what our discussion is, and as a German, I have quite an insight what is going on in the German market with my background also from the German Solar Energy Society. But and also, as you said, also Adriaan, for South Africa, I mean, the Germans invested in solar like crazy, private persons, in the last 2 years, and it's also difficult to find still roof space, whereby the market is still growing, constantly growing. And so only Germany installed 14 gigawatt peak last year, and they aim for, I think, 15 or 16 this year. And then starting from the next year, they want the next following 5 years, they want to do 22 gigawatt per year. So that's quite a thing. So, Tsakani, what else?
Yes, there's one more.
With the return of invest, this will take too long. So we have a finance course because that's I can't say you what is the estimated return of invest on an installation. It depends.
Yes, I agree with that. One other question. I think this one is for Adriaan. It says, am I wrong if I say it's cheaper to add more modules and ditch the tracker?
It's the standard answer from any panelist would be it depends. I think referring back to my previous longer version of the answer, I think in some cases, yes, I would recommend, if it's what would you like to achieve? I think and what's your load profile like? Is it a feed-in? Is it self-consumption? Are you charging batteries? Are you pumping water? So there's so many variations in terms of what makes sense for you. And in utility scale, it does not make sense. Let's say larger CNI utility, it does not make sense to add more modules, because your increase in yield of tracking is financially a better decision. But in some cases, in smaller systems, you would not necessarily have the same scenario where it would make sense for you to just increase your number of installed capacity. If it's about a wider production curve, you can go east-west, for example. If it's a time of use scheme, you can rather integrate it with batteries. And you would probably find that there would be a scenario where both those cases are true. I think on smaller, let's call it sub 5 gigawatt projects, you probably are better off adding more PV. If it's a purely ROI investment decision, then the answer will usually always be that it makes more sense to go with tracker over the 20-year lifespan.
All right, thank you. And there's another one as well. I think it's more of like a comment, but I'm sure Adriaan, you'll also be able to tackle it. It says, I wanted to say that the trekking systems have a downside in the coastal area because of salt in the air and the dust most of the time.
Well, I think I wouldn't necessarily disagree, but I also wouldn't necessarily agree. I think the challenges that you have at the coast, for the most part, being corrosion. It's consistent through any system type. I think rooftop generally it's a lot easier because there we exclusively work with aluminium and stainless steel. So that's usually not a problem. And that's also why Schletter offers a 25-year warranty, even if it's at the coast on rooftop systems. But if it's ground mount structures, there's a couple of different topics at play. Also, your geotechnical environment. Is there a salt spray component? Because coastal can range from C3 to C5 high. Corrosion environments. So our tracker per se is not really, from a mounting structure perspective, it's not a risk to go to the coast. Like I mentioned before, it's an open drive system. Dust does not make really a difference there. If it's about corrosion, it's the same steel that we use for fixed tilt off ground mount, fixed tilt off a tracker, excuse me. If it comes to the dust on top of the modules, that's maybe an interesting discussion. I think if we look into different stow strategies, and this is another 3-hour webinar that we can open up. But if you stow at 0 degrees at night, chances are that you will have moisture and dust settling on top of this, and when you start tracking your cleaning, could be affected. It could also be said because you're tracking, all the way to 60 plus and minus, that your self-cleaning effect is actually better with the tracking system. So again, it might depend on which environment you're in. So I think that question or that statement could be true or less true in depending on how we look at it. Yeah.
Just to also add to that, our inverters are anti-corrosion C5 as well, and also our machines are IP66, so that can also help with salty areas.
Very good. So that, Tsakani?
Yes, there's one more. This one is for Jason, and it says, what is the function of Solis Export Power Manager?
Yes, I saw that. Okay, so the Solis Export Power Manager is when you're running a CNI grid tie system, you would obviously need an export power manager for 2 reasons. Number one is to avoid the export of power being exported into the grid. If you are allowed to export into the grid, you can do that because the export power manager also reads the consumption. Okay, so it reads the loads. You will then connect your CTs onto the export power manager where your connection point is. And then obviously the export power manager also has a built-in data logger. So you will then get all your data onto the Solis cloud through the export power manager. The export power manager then controls the inverters based on the load.
A very technical question and answer at the end. So we are already coming to an end, and I think it was a very interesting exchange. And what we learned is every day, every year, so everything is still growing. So new potential, new developments. And so, I mean, if you remember when we started in solar, and so all of us, we are working already, we have been working in solar quite a while. And so nobody would have thought so that panels would be one day so big, that hybrid inverters can be so affordable. And I think that was also the mood and the spirit from the Intersolar. So that there's a lot of new developments, but still more potential. So, and I would like to thank you. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Adriaan. Thank you, Tsakani. I don't know if you have any final administration statement for our audience.
Yes, so I'll be sending out the recording of the event to everyone who's attended, and it will have a bit more information on the course that Ansha presented in the beginning. And I'll also add the contact details of Adriaan and Jason if you've got a bit more questions for them. And yeah, And for the person asking about the estimate ROI on the installation, I'll also add the financial cost for that. Then you can get more information from it. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, then thank you and have a very nice evening. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Keep well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Cheers, Adriaan. Ciao.